over 3 decades, I've commissioned a lot of public art. Billboards installed in a forest, oversized bananas in a cage, a bronze children's play park built from infamous modernist sculptures in miniature size, artworks on flags on top of major landmark buildings in cities, big work, strange work, permanent and temporary, work that's had to survive committees, funders, planners, extreme weather, politics and time. And what I've learned sitting on the commissioner's side of the table is not what you get taught as an artist. And I'm sharing it because it changes how you could be approaching public commissions and before you even pick up and say yes to the brief. So I'm going to give you the 3 filters that pull this whole 9-part commission series together and that I apply in reverse when I'm deciding which artist to commission. And I'm also going to give you one thing that I want you to take away from this series. It might not be what you expect. So if you're new here, thanks for joining me. I'm Ceri Hand and this is Extraordinary Creatives. I've got 35 years in the contemporary art world as a gallerist, curator, commissioner of public art, institutional director and now coaching artists and creative leaders worldwide to make a bigger impact and earn more money doing what they love. This is episode 9 of a 9-part series on commissions. It's the final one, so please do listen to the others because this will make a lot more sense because it's built on the other 8 episodes. But also please do follow the podcast because it's free and hopefully it's going to help you on your journey. So over the last 8 weeks, we've built a complete commissioning practice together. We've looked at the mindset, the 5 signatures of underpricing, the commission ecosystem, the inquiry filter, the chemistry call, the alignment document, paid concept development, the production agreement, managing the making, the delivery, the legacy package, what public art is, the roles you can play, and what changes when the commission is this big. So today we're going to cover 3 things and then I'm going to leave you with the one sentence that I hope you carry out of the whole series. So let's begin with the harder questions because there are 4 questions you can't avoid engaging with if you're working in public art. That's co-creation with communities, contemporary memorialisation, sustainability and the political dimension of the public realm. So let me take each in turn. First up is co-creation with communities. And this is a hot topic and a lot of commissioners are focusing on this now because public art increasingly involves the communities who will live with the finished work. And this is good. This addresses a long history of public art being parachuted into places without consultation, of artists arriving with their own ideas and leaving them behind without conversation. But co-creation is really genuinely difficult to do well, and the language around it is kind of run ahead of the practice. True co-creation means the community is not just consulted but involved in the conceptual decisions, the themes, the selection of the artist, the shape of the work itself. And that requires an artist who's willing to let participants lead and to act as facilitator in part of the process, with limited authorship over some decisions. So if we look at Clay Station, for example, at Seven Sisters Underground Station in North London, this was commissioned by former podcast guest Kira Blakey when she was working with Art on the Underground. And it was made by the Turner Prize-winning collective Assemble in collaboration with ceramicist Matthew Raw. So over 1,000 handmade tiles cladding a kiosk that had stood empty for a decade. There was a kiln set up on site, workshops where local residents made tiles alongside the artists, 2 paid traineeships for young people from the local area. So the work is the building, but the building is the community's labour. And that's what co-creation looks like when an organisation, a curator and an artist all commit to it properly. The building belongs to the community. It's made with the community. So again, we look internationally at Theaster Gates and the Dorchester projects on Chicago's South Side, where abandoned buildings in a neglected black neighbourhood were bought, restored and reimagined by Gates and his Rebuild Foundation as libraries, archives, performance spaces and live-work housing for artists and families together. So the work isn't an object placed in the community. The work is the community, made visible, made permanent and made the author of its own future. Gates calls it radical hospitality. It's also one of the clearest pieces of socially engaged public practice anywhere in the world. So that kind of assignment is not every artist, and it shouldn't be. Some artists are brilliant at co-creation. Others are brilliant at responding to a place individually. Both are valid. The mistake is artists that are duped into co-creation when they're actually doing consultation, or worse, doing token engagement to satisfy a funding requirement. So if you are commissioned to do a co-creation, please do it properly. Plan for a long lead-in. If you don't have a long lead-in, then you have to raise that with the commissioner. You have to talk to locally embedded organisations before any project plan is written. Find out what the community actually wants and needs. Build their resourcing into the budget. Credit the organisations and groups throughout your media releases, press interviews and reports, and maintain the relationship beyond the project. So if you're not the right artist for co-creation, it doesn't matter. But just don't pretend to be, and don't let other people talk you into it. Recommend somebody else who is. That referral is going to build your reputation more than a badly executed co-creation commission ever would. Next up is contemporary memorialisation. And this is one of the most live conversations in public art globally right now. How do we mark events, people, communities, histories in the public realm in a way that is honest about complexity? The work being made by the artists leading this conversation has one thing in common, whatever form it takes. Again, it's rooted in the communities it represents. It draws from lived experience, from contested history, from voices the public realm has spent centuries overlooking. It's not memorialisation done to a community. It's memorialisation done with them and from the inside. So we could look at variations of that, such as Thomas J. Price's Grounded in the Stars in Times Square, or Reaching Out in 3 Mills Green. Large-scale bronze figures of fictional, composite black women and men occupying the scale and the plinth of the traditional monument, and using both to insist on a presence that the public realm has spent centuries refusing. We could look at Veronica Ryan's commission for the Windrush generation in Hackney in London, marble and bronze sculptures of Caribbean fruits and vegetables, migration told through the language of food, market and home by an artist who carries that history herself. Or Hugh Locke's long engagement with contested histories, the work on existing statues, the procession at Tate Britain, the new commissions that hold colonial history in the same frame as the community still living with its consequences. Now, Paul Hedge, who from Hales Gallery was on the podcast, so please do listen to that, because it also gives you a sense of how Hugh has been supported in making these commissions too. We can look at another previous podcast guest, Rafael Lozano Hemmer's Voz Alta, marking the 40th anniversary of the Tlatelolco massacre by letting the people of Mexico City speak the memorial into being in a plaza where the state had spent decades refusing to acknowledge what happened. Different artists, different forms, what they share is that the work is grounded in real history, real community, real research, not in an idea about representation imposed from the outside. We have to also consider how communities are increasingly involved in deciding who and what gets memorialised. So the conversations about retaining and reinterpreting contested heritage rather than removing it is important right now, just as how grief is being marked, how absence is being honoured, how communities are reclaiming the right to decide their own iconography. So if you're working in commemorative public art, you're working in this conversation. The brief is rarely simple. The history is rarely uncontested. Your job is to bring rigour, listening and imagination, and to refuse the easy answer. The instinct to balance out historical representation by simply adding more figures to plinths without doing the deeper work is usually not the right answer. Representation treated as a counting exercise doesn't address that deeper question, which is whose voices the work actually carries and who decided. Memorialisation that comes from the community it honours, whatever form it takes, will almost always do more lasting work than memorialisation imposed onto one. Next up, we've got sustainability. The world has changed, we know. A public art commission that ignores its environmental impact is no longer credible. Embodied carbon, material sourcing, transport, fabrication processes, reuse and recycling, maintenance footprint, eventual decommissioning. These are not nice to haves anymore. They're part of the brief, whether the brief mentions them or not. The artists doing the most interesting work in public art right now are designing for circular economies, using reused components and recycled materials, sourcing locally to reduce transport, choosing materials that can be recycled at the end of life, working with fabricators who share these values. Look at previous podcast guest Daisy Ginsberg's Pollinator Pathmaker, an algorithmically designed planting scheme that uses the artwork itself to support pollinator populations. Installations at the Eden Project, in Kensington Gardens with the Serpentine, in Berlin. The work is the ecosystem. The artwork is the climate response. We can look at another previous podcast guest, Shazad Darwood's Leviathan, a long-running cycle of film, sculpture, textile and public installation made in dialogue with marine biologists, oceanographers and migration scholars travelling between Venice, Liverpool, Salisbury Cathedral, Abu Dhabi. The work brings the ecological catastrophe under the sea into conversation with the politics above it and uses the public realm to do it. So there are organisations, I've worked with many of them, that have been doing this for decades and are still pushing the field. We've got UP projects that I was a consultant for in the UK, leading the field in socially engaged public commissioning. Invisible Dust. We've got Future City working internationally on cultural strategies across 4 continents. Again, previous podcast guest Mark Davey speaks quite openly about that. The Public Art online resource for funding and commissioning best practice are also looking at the people setting the standards. The principle is simple: do more with less. Use more reused components and recycled materials. If it has to be new, think about where it comes from. Reduce harmful chemicals, reduce travel, reduce deliveries. Make sure everything gets used again. If you're not yet thinking this way, please start. The next generation of public art commissions will demand it, and the commissioners who matter are already moving in this direction. Next up, we have the political dimension. Public art lives in the public realm, which means public art is political whether it intends to be or not. Whose stories get told, whose communities get represented, whose histories get marked, whose absences get acknowledged. These are not neutral decisions. So the artist that pretends they're neutral is making a political decision, just an unexamined one. The artists doing the most enduring public work understand this. They engage with it deliberately. They do their research. They speak with people whose lived experience they do not share. They get things wrong and they learn. They build practice that is generous, rigorous and accountable. Look at Doris Salcedo's Sumando Asencias in Plaza Bolivar in Bogota. After Colombia voted to reject the peace agreement with the FARC, the Colombian artist put out a call. Thousands of volunteers gathered in the city's central civic square, the plaza of the cathedral, the Palace of Justice, the national capital, and wrote the names of more than 2,000 victims of the country's decades-long armed conflict in ash on white cloth. The sheets were sewn together by hand and laid across the plaza as a single 7-kilometre shroud. a work made by the people of Bogota in the public square where the state had spent decades failing them. Look at previous podcast guest Rafael Lozano Hemmer's Voz Alta in Mexico City, the memorial for the 40th anniversary of the Tlatelolco massacre. Participants spoke into a megaphone in the Plaza del Tres Culturas, and their voices modulated searchlights across the city, broadcast live on radio. Public memory reclaimed by the public in the square where the state had spent decades refusing to acknowledge what happened. Look at Yinka Shonabari's Nelson ship in a bottle on the 4th plinth in Trafalgar Square, a state replica of HMS Victory sails made from the Dutch wax fabrics that became the visual language of African dress through colonial trade routes. The first 4th plinth commissioned by a black British artist, cited in direct conversation with Nelson's column in the most explicitly imperial public square in London. Look at previous podcast guest La Buena Mikaiva, whose text-based murals at the South Bank Centre, on the Brent Cross Town substation, and across London, Miami, LA, Vienna, use the visual language of advertising to celebrate black life, black joy and black presence in cities that have historically refused them space. Her name in the Acholi language of northern Uganda means messenger of the chief. The work is grounded in heritage, in spirituality, in explicit politics of who gets to occupy public space. So you don't have to make overtly political work, but you do have to understand that the public realm is a political space, and your work is in conversation with that, whether you choose to be or not. The audience for a public artwork is not only the client who paid for it, it's every person who walks past it for the next 50 years. That audience has views, they have histories, that audience has a right to be considered. So next up, is public art for you? Because before we close out the whole series, let me give you 4 honest questions to sit with if you're considering moving into public art. Firstly, are you comfortable working over very long timescales? Public art commissions routinely take 2 to 5 years from first conversation to installation. Some take a decade. If you need creative cycles that complete in months, public art will be slow torture. Are you comfortable in rooms with non-artists? Architects, engineers, planners, lawyers, community representatives, local politicians, funders. If those rooms drain you, public art is not your territory. If they energise you, you might be unique or a natural. Can you hold the integrity of your work through compromise? Public commissions involve compromise, always. The question is what you're willing to compromise on and what you won't. If you haven't thought clearly about that distinction, public art will erode you. Do you want your work to be in continuous public conversation? Because once a public artwork is up, it's everyone's. Public will love it, hate it, photograph it, climb on it, write about it, complain about it, claim it as theirs. And if that thought makes you anxious, public art might not be your medium. If those questions land well, begin with temporary or meanwhile commissions. They're the entry point. There's lower stakes, shorter timescales. They build your evidence base. Find the producers, curators and consultants in your region who programme public art. They're not necessarily gatekeepers, but they're definitely people to have conversations with to see if you're in alignment. Build yourself a research document, a public art document. Apply for things, start the conversation with people who have expertise already. So I promised you 3 filters, and we're going to pull the entire series together because we've spent 9 episodes building a complete commissioning practice. Mindset, ecosystem, 5 pricing signatures to avoid, the inquiry filter, the chemistry call, the alignment document, paid concept development, the proposal, the production agreement, managing the making, delivery, legacy package, public art rationales, public art roles, what changes when the commission is bigger, and the harder questions. But the whole structure only works if you're actually willing to walk away. because a process without the willingness to say no is just admin. It looks good on your website, does nothing for your life. What gives you permission to walk away is 3 filters. So please apply these before the negotiation even starts. Filter 1, joy. Am I genuinely excited by this? Does this feel fun, fulfilling, or creatively energizing? Filter 2, safety. Can I show up as my authentic self with this client? Do I feel respected, valued, and heard? Filter 3, income. Does this meet or exceed the number I set at the start of the year? Am I being paid fairly for my time, my materials, my expertise? If the answer is no to any of those, the commission is not ready to become a yes. Now, my invitation is to carry one sentence out of this whole series. Saying no to a commission that doesn't pass the filters is not lost income. It's preserved capacity. Every no protects the yes you're truly waiting for. The process gives you the structure, the filters give you the permission, and you need both. So here's my final truth for you. I'm going to leave you with this. The artist who wins commissions isn't the most talented. The artist who wins commissions is the one who makes it easy to say yes, makes it safe to trust them, and never starts from scratch. What you've built across these 9 episodes isn't just admin, hopefully it's authority, an ecosystem you built in advance, a filter that screens seriousness, a chemistry call that tests fit, an alignment document that kills 70% of future problems before they arise, paid concept development that positions you as a professional, a production agreement that makes the making calm, a management rhythm that handles client psychology, a delivery that tells the story, a legacy package that turns buyers into custodians. And for those of you moving into public art, the role clarity, stakeholder fluency, and honest engagement with the harder questions that distinguish the artists who do ambitious work from those who get ambitious briefs and then get crushed by them. Built once, used again and again. The artist who burns out on commissions does so because they're usually rebuilding the entire system from scratch for every new inquiry. The artist who thrives has built the scaffold once and now runs their commission practice through it, calmly, profitably, without drama. I hope you're going to be the second one. So a note to you before we close. 9 episodes is a lot. If you've stayed with me across the whole series, thanks so much. The work hopefully is now yours. You have the scaffold, you've got the filters, you have the questions to ask yourself and the questions to ask your commissioners. Go and build your practice, not all at once, but stage by stage. You don't have to have all of this in place next month. You just need to know that it's there and you can start building it today. One final piece of homework to close the series. Write out the 11 stages on a single page, plus the 3 filters, plus the public art editions, if that's your territory. 1 page stuck to the studio wall. That's your commissioning practice visible in front of you. And every time a new inquiry lands, you walk your eye down that page. Is this passing the ecosystem test? Have I applied the filter? Am I having a chemistry call? Have I sent the alignment document? Am I building paid concept development into the fee? Have I named the review points? Am I delivering the story? Have I prepared the legacy package? 1 page. Every commission from now on runs through it. That's the practice I want you to have at the end of this series. Next week, we're moving on to something new, a slightly different conversation, but it's the one about how to handle the client who keeps asking for more. Scope creep mid-commission in real time without losing the relationship and without giving away your weekends. If you've ever found yourself agreeing to just one more small change, you'll want to be here for that one. A standalone episode, not a series. Hit follow or subscribe now so it lands in your feed automatically. And if this 9-part series has been useful, the best thing you could do is to share it with other artists who need it, All 9 episodes belong together, so please pass the links on, and that's how this work finds the people it's for. And for text versions of everything I've shared across these 9 episodes, with new practical guidance landing in your inbox every week, subscribe to my weekly free newsletter, Beat the Block, at cerihand.com/subscribe. The link is in the show notes. And if you feel so inclined, drop me a message and tell me what landed across the series. What are you going to build first? And what do you want me to go deeper on next? I read everything. So thanks for listening. Go build your scaffold. See you soon. Thank you for spending this time with me. If something in this episode landed for you, please share it with one person who needs to hear it. Come and find me on Instagram at Ceri Hand, that's CeriHand, and join thousands of creatives reading my weekly newsletter at cerihand.com/subscribe for practical advice you can use this week straight to your inbox every Friday. Until then, keep making the work that only you can make.